Imagine that. Marvin Lewis is the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. 2017 ends, and the Cincinnati Bengals are watching the playoffs just like I am from their couches at home. Gee, I wonder who could have seen this coming. Oh, bungles, baby. Wow. Anyways, Cincinnati Bengals. What to say about their 2017 season? I can only imagine what some of the Bengals fans are probably saying at this point. But here's what I can say. Starting off right away, their offense was a complete and total mess. So after a couple of games only, they fired their offensive coordinator because, again, in the Cincinnati Bengals hierarchy of doing things and in that organization, the head coach is never accountable for any of the crap that goes wrong. Ever. How? They fire the offensive coordinator, bring in somebody else. Who gives a crap at this point? They start off the season 0-3. So already for a team that has some basket cases, frankly, in that locker room, a team that could ill afford coming off of 2016 to start off sluggishly, they started off 0-3. So they were behind the 8 ball from the very beginning. They only went 3-3 in the division, and again, 2 of those victories against the Browns, so those only count like quarter victories any damn ways. You go 1-3 against the AFC South. You go 1-3 against the NFC North, including getting blown out at home by the freaking Bears. John Fox went in there and blew you the fuck out. That's embarrassing. You're going 1-3 against a bad AFC South. 1-3 against the NFC North, including losing to Chicago. Yeah, no surprise, the Cincinnati Bengals missed the playoffs for the second straight season. As they so often do under Marvin Lewis, they didn't make it to the postseason dance. So, after all that time, after all those failures, after 0 playoff wins and 7 playoff appearances over the course of 15 seasons, a record that even Jeff Fisher looks down at and mocks and laughs at, Mike Brown's ultimate answer to turning things around in Cincinnati and bringing bigger and better changes for that organization in 2018 and beyond is to give Marvin Lewis 2 more damn years in a contract to be the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. 15 years isn't enough to see this isn't the guy to get the job done. 15 years of mediocrity and you sign me up for 2 more of this shit. Unbelievable. And I know there are still the nut huggers and the defenders of Marvin Lewis that are going to sit there and say, well, you look at that team, how much more successful did you really expect? Well, he's so influential in the decision-making in terms of the front office. He is the de facto general manager, even though Mike Brown is technically the general manager. It's really Marvin Lewis that runs the show. He's the one that constructed this mediocre crap-ass team with no real upside or potential to be anything other than what the hell they were in 2016 and 2017 at this point. And then on top of that, 15 years, not 1 playoff victory. There's going to be idiots that are going to sit there and say, remember the Bengals of the 90s and remember where they were before Marvin Lewis. And look where they are now with Marvin Lewis. Yeah, they're heading back to the path of being the Bengals again. This whole notion of just because it's better than what it used to be is not a good excuse or justification for continuing on the same path after a decade and a half of suck. That's crazy. If we use that logic, then that means when a guy like Pat Shurmur or Rob Chudzinski failed as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and early on in his first year, Mike Pettine had the Browns at like 7-4 or whatever the hell it was. The Browns should have immediately dropped trial, said, we don't even need KY, give it to us straight in the keister, we'll give you 10 years and $200 million because it's better than what it has been before. It still sucked. That's stupid. That is stupid defense mechanism. That is stupid logic to use. Mediocre is better than terrible. That doesn't mean you should waste a decade and a half and then decide to extend it 2 more years in that cycle of mediocrity. It's unbelievable. Like, does Marvin Lewis legitimately have picture of Paul or Mike Brown or even Paul Brown, shit, who knows, with goats or little boys or little girls, hashtag he too. I don't know what the hell this is going on here. But this is insane. What, because they came back and they beat Detroit, knocked them out of the playoffs, and then they beat Baltimore, knocked them out of the playoffs the last 2 weeks of the year. Who gives a shit? All the Bengals did was help a couple of other teams save the exercise of futility of going to the playoffs and losing and ultimately watching the playoffs and the same place that the Bengals are on their couches at home. Like everybody wants to shit on Jeff Fisher. At least Jeff Fisher won playoff games. At least Jeff Fisher went to a Super Bowl. What the hell has Marvin Lewis ever done? What, 5 straight years of losing in the wild card round? Ooh, that's a good one. Give me a break. This is insane. It's not to say Marvin Lewis is a terrible coach. It's not to say that he's not a decent guy or he's not a semi-effective leader. It is to say after 15 years, you are basically signing off on it being okay to be mediocre with your organization. At 15 years, clearly whatever Marvin Lewis is doing is not working. And you would think with Mike Brown at his advancing age, getting closer to the grave by the day, at some point in time it would be important enough to get out of your comfort zone and shake things up because you maybe, just maybe, would like to see your organization finally win a Super Bowl sometime in your lifetime. You went there twice in the 80s and lost, but shit, at least you went there twice. With Forrest Gregg first and then Sam Weiss later in the decade. What's the end game here? We're going to make it to the divisional round in 2018? Give me a break. I cannot believe that they sat there and gave Marvin Lewis potentially 2 more years. Like 15 wasn't enough! Anyways. So what's this team going to... It doesn't even matter what they're going to do in this offseason. They've got like $40 million in salary cap space. They've got guys that are going to be free agents. Tyler Eifert, you know, he's nice when he's healthy, but that's only for 6 to 8 games a year. So how much money are you really going to give him? AJ McCarron right now is a restricted free agent. We'll see how this whole process plays out and see if he ends up winning his unrestricted free agency. You've got other free agents like Jeremy Hill and Kevin Huber. You got to start thinking about in this offseason potentially extending 2 of the actual studs that you have on that team in Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap. So where is this team going to get a whole lot better? And it's a real shame because for so many years people wanted to just blame Andy Dalton. And you can blame Andy Dalton in part because ultimately he is the quarterback. He's supposed to be the leader. He's supposed to be the face of the franchise. That's the way the quarterback position works. And so often when things go well, quarterbacks get all of the credit. And when they don't, it seems like depending on the quarterback, they either get all the blame or none of the blame. Well, the truth is they shouldn't get all the credit when their team is successful and wins, and they shouldn't get all of the blame when their team loses. But they are ultimately part of the team, so they do deserve part of the blame. And after all these years, Andy Dalton is what he is. A maddeningly inconsistent, average NFL starting quarterback. But it has been the failure of Marvin Lewis to put a better team around him. Like this team went into this past draft, and I talked about how they had the biggest swing and miss potential with this draft. They went for the grand slam but could end up striking out swinging. That this was an incredibly risky draft. He felt like it was risky because Marvin Lewis felt like ridiculously, for no real reason clearly, that it could be his last year if things didn't go well. It didn't freaking matter. Win a couple of meaningless games when your team's already far removed from playoff contention, not 2 teams out of the playoffs. That's good enough to give you 2 more years and several million more dollars. But drafting a guy like John Ross in round 1, yes, it's great. He ran 4.2 whatever the fuck at the combine. But even then, he couldn't even make it through the 40 without getting hurt. And John Ross did what John Ross did. He got hurt, and he played, 1 or 2 games this year? So you swung and missed on a guy in round 1 significantly, badly. Whatever. Again, it doesn't matter. You look at the head of the draft, they've got each of their picks in the first 6 rounds. They got 2 picks in the 7th round. What do they need? Well, they let Andrew Whitworth go in free agency to the Rams because they felt Cedric Obehi and Jake Fisher, the combination of them, were going to be able to man the bookend tackles for Andy Dalton in this offense. We found out they both stink. So now the Bengals go into an offseason a couple of years after spending 1st and 2nd round picks on Obehi and Jake Fisher respectively, potentially looking at needing to get both a new left tackle and a new right tackle. Gee, I wonder who orchestrated that. Marvin Lewis. What else do they need? Linebacker help. After so many years, this is still, to me, a need for this team. Vontaze Burfict's another ding-dong thing away from being suspended for an entire season, it feels like. But beyond that, it feels like it's been a gaping void of suck for this roster for quite a while. I still feel like they could use some help at the safety position. They could maybe use another edge rusher, even though it seems like Lawson might be one of those guys. Coming out of Auburn, he had a pretty good rookie year. So the sad thing is you'd have been much better off taking that injury-prone player in round 1 than the injury-prone player you did take in round 1 in John Ross. Again, for the life of me, I cannot believe that Marvin Lewis got 2 more seasons. And watch this dude somehow bumblefuck his way into the wild card round in 2018 and make me look like an idiot, to then only lose. So what the hell was the point anyways? Unbelievable. Sorry, Bengals fans. I know the record may not fully indicate it, but this really feels like they're back to being the Bungles again.